Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transforming their business. When I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest episode with special guest Chris Wilson. Chris is an executive coach, competition-winning speaker, and an accredited NLP practitioner, and he focuses on enabling others to use their voice to create impact and influence. I met Chris last year when he spoke at a networking event, and I found his presentation really engaging and thought-provoking, so I'm really glad to have him here today. Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to start, if it's okay, by, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey here to date?
Well, it's a short story, and the thread that connects them really is what I would call service and moments of truth. Hotelier was my last paid job in a Marriott hotel, and then from there, conference and events company, telemarketing company, COVID cliff, then coaching, which is where you find me now, combining selling and service around moments of truth.
Why do you define it as moments of truth, Chris? What's the moments of truth for you in terms of definition?
Well, we're having one now. This is a conversation that's live, it's recorded, and therefore, technically speaking, it can't ever be replicated. It's you, me, and Romesh, now Mike, talking together on a camera on a digital platform. And therefore, for me, it's a moment of truth because I am conscious of your listeners and your viewers. And it's a moment of truth for me to serve their time while they are on the platform.
And why are you so passionate about this subject? And why are you so passionate about helping people communicate and tell stories in a better way?
Well, let's go back through the channels of history. Churchill, Mandela, Mother Teresa. You have this time when people are on a stage and they have this opportunity to connect with an audience with a message. It's a clarion call to fight on the beaches, to put a man on the moon, to free ourselves from apartheid or whatever it might be. And that message connects with the hearts and minds of people. And from that, the ripple can travel. And that's why, for me, the spoken word is such an important quotient of being human.
That is lovely. And before this show, you talked to me about at what point you decided to become a mentor and get into sort of working with people to help them articulate themselves better. Can you sort of explain that to our audience?
Well, I've always had service in me. Even when I was a 14-year-old pot washer in a Beefeater steakhouse, I would know that the chef, if I treated him well, then he wouldn't burn the pans. And if I didn't do the washing up well, he'd give me the really charcoal infested pan that had been sat on the grill for the last 5 minutes. And it would make my job really hard. So for me, that was when I really understood that when you treat others well, the reciprocation comes back to you full circle. And when I started working as a telemarketing business, I noticed that even though we gave people great appointments from their data, they came back and said, yeah, that appointment wasn't very good because he didn't convert. And I was curious, well, you've told me this is the avatar you wanted to be introduced to. We've given you the appointment. And yet for some reason, it still falls back on us as the appointment setter that we were at fault. And I really dwelled on that and thought, perhaps there's something in the technique, the style, and the way that they were doing their discovery, or even the way that it was selling, that needed work, which is why I decided to go deeper on that, to coach and consult and empower people to be able to sell with service as opposed to sell for selling's sake.
Yeah, interesting. And do you see it? You've talked there about being it really valuable for business leaders to sell a vision. You've touched on in terms of the Mandela example. You've talked there about selling an improvement in sales. There's also the kind of buying into your teams. What's your view on the importance of this sort of leadership for leaders in small businesses and developing a strong narrative and helping them know how to articulate their stories and vision properly?
Well, for me, it's everything. But often it's the last thing. They will think about a meeting and they're often busy. They're going from one thing to the next, and suddenly they see the Teams appointment open up, or they're put on a town hall and it says, Mike, right, go for it, you're live. And then you think, I can't even think what I've been doing for the last 5 minutes, let alone what I'm going to do for the next half an hour. And that's my phrase of, just because you're titled, it doesn't mean to say you're entitled to wing it. And often leaders do wing it because they are always on catch up. And for me, the higher you go, the bigger footprint you have with your message. And therefore, it's more important to spend more time on your messaging because it ripples around more people.
Really interesting. And when you talk about messaging, I know you're touching on style, you're touching on content. I know you give lovely metaphors in terms of where you talk. Are you cover the whole area when you're helping and mentoring someone in terms of building up a story?
There's lots in that question, Mike. Yes. You've got many facets of the communication arc. And it could be visual as well. I'm doing now, looking down the camera, and its ability to connect with that audience. It could be acoustic in terms of the tonality that I use. I could whisper, I could pause, I could use curiousness or confusion, or I could shock with awe and tonality and language. And then we've also got the detailed orientations. Often in Romesh's world, it's about the finance, the technical, and people like to see all the detail. Or even some people like to have kinesthetic types of learnings, and I need to build language and metaphors of what the visual and the meaning comes to life. Perhaps be clouds or birds singing or things rotting, whatever it is that connects with the emotions of somebody's kinesthetic. And that's the whole aspect of communication. It's not just what we say, it's how we say it and how we depict the words that will then become meaningful for somebody.
And go on, Romesh.
No. Oh, okay. Thanks, Mike. So Chris, can you give some practical examples? We'd love to hear some practical examples of how you've helped business leaders or leadership in general change for the better. Can you describe how your methodology has empowered them?
Well, without giving any names away, I'll call this one John. John was is an executive coach working at a very high level. And he said, I believe that I'm missing something when I'm articulating my message, particularly in networking meetings. Can you help me with that? Of course we can. So the first part was just to go to a networking meeting with him and observe and see how he is in a natural world. And what I noticed immediately was that it was pace. He was so excited and passionate about what he wanted to distill to the audience that the audience couldn't catch up because he knew his messaging inside out, but he was dropping so much information that the audience was furiously writing it down, and he was going so fast that actually he was missing the beauty of some of his narrative. So it was important for him just to slow down and stop and allow people to reflect and write things down. And then he would ask them perhaps what would be the call to action. That would be an example of John. What questions do you have about John, for example?
That's fascinating. So slowing down really just helped him become more impactful, essentially, and get his message across more clearly. And you were helping him simplify that message somewhat so that it wasn't so information packed.
Yeah, and it was also about giving him structure. In an elevator pitch networking meeting, there is a way that you can introduce yourself and give evidence. And it's often the first few words that you say that it's like a hook on a social media post or in a film. James Bond doesn't go to James Bond and say, hello, my name's James Bond and I've been a spy for all these years and I am now called Daniel and I used to be called Roger and before that used to be Pierce and I came from a book narrated by this chap called Fleming. They hit you straight with the sizzle of him on a train wrestling with an enemy and there's all things waving past and everything else, and it hooks you in to the moment of the film that says, I'd like to see more. And when you go to a networking pitch, an elevator pitch, you need to, well, my belief is that you really need to grip people's attention so that they're wanting to find out what's next. And it often starts with a problem. And then from the problem, you have the solution. And then you have evidence around how you've made that solution come to life. And then the benefit that you can have as part of that. And you can do that in 60 seconds. You could do that in 5 minutes, or you could do it over a longer period, maybe 30 minutes. But they all have structure to the way that you bring your communication to life. Right.
So there's a real element of preparation, isn't there? That I remember that you've talked about previously, and I can hear in your answer there, thinking deeply in advance about what you're trying to achieve before you don't ad lib it, essentially.
What's Benjamin Franklin? Fail to plan to fail. And even in this podcast today, I will honor both of you on the basis that you've already helped the audience have a good podcast, because we've had a chemistry call beforehand to talk about what the aspects of the show is, who the audience is, what's the recording time going to be. And also you've helped me with some potential themes and questions that we may get into. And that's all about preparation. There are some podcasts that I have done where you think, has the host even thought about how this conversation is going to go? Have they considered what message will be valuable for the audience? And again, it's that intentional planning that will deliver so much more gold as a result of the thoroughness of thought.
Well,
and are you advocating that people are incredibly well prepared, Chris, before they go into networking groups or presentations on stage? Are you advocating that they stand up and prepare in advance and it's very well written and it's scripted and or even rehearsed? Or are you just trying to give them tools and techniques to adapt to the situation that they're in because you're tailoring it to a different audience?
The answer to that, Mike, is both.
Okay.
However, never scripted.
Never scripted.
Never scripted. Because if I'm going to a networking meeting and I've got a script down here that I'm trying to read, there's going to be a degradation of my ability to connect that message through the spoken word and through the visual aspects. Some people will be better with the script. And I always say, whatever works for you is whatever works for you. But if we can try to be more authentic with the conversation, if you're in the pub with your mates, you can talk freely and liberally without any inhibition. And yet people suddenly say, Mike, you're up next. And the whole aspect of being judged or not failing or what am I going to say grips you with anxiety and fear. And then you feel as though you need to have the crutch of the script to enable you to do that. So preparation is absolutely of paramount importance. Yes, but I'm not a fan of being scripted, because that for me is not authentic. And then even when we get into that aspect of being impromptu, there are still things that you can do to practice. It's like a muscle. As a gymnast, as a sprinter, as a diver, you don't just suddenly get on the 10-meter platform and just dive in and hope for the best. You've gone from the 1 meter to the platform, to the foam, to the mattress, to the coach. You've warmed up, you've limbered up, you've stretched, you've visualized yourself flying through the water, and all the aspects of preparation. Speaking is no different, but often people don't put the work in to be ready to speak. If you're working from home, perhaps the first thing you do on a Zoom call is at 9:01, the first words you've uttered to anybody, if you work on your own, will be the words that you put to camera. You haven't done anything to warm up your voice, maybe a tongue twister, a little bit of vibrato, whatever it is. But speaking is no different to a sport. It's practice, it's visualization, and it's also rehearsal.
Mm-hmm. It's quite nice that for me to hear some of those things, Chris, because actually I'm a real believer in some of those points. I suppose instinctively, I do like to prepare, and especially when I was younger, I was a very nervous public speaker. So I did fully script out speeches, and actually the highest profile speeches I used to do back in the day was when I was best man, really important for the people I was making the speech about. And obviously, there's certain pressure with that kind of thing. But actually, the preparation really helped me. And sometimes I would have props or distractions so that people weren't always looking at me. So I tried to do that. In a recent speech or a recent presentation I did, I realized that I've managed to evolve that quite significantly, because I do need something. I find that, I want something just in case, if you like. So I like to have bullet points now. So I know that there's a structure and I can talk around that structure. And often I don't need to refer to the notes. But occasionally I do. And I've noticed that people don't really notice as long as you're engaging with them most of the time. So yeah, the points I've liked from what you've said and really resonate with me are the fact that, preparation is good, that actually, everyone is different and play to your strengths, but also critically practicing is everything. Right. And I think this podcast, Mike and I, co-hosts of this podcast, this is episode 28, I think. Gosh, something I don't think either of us dreamed of, when we first started, and it's been really exciting. And I would say that, by doing this regularly, we've become hopefully a bit better. I've enjoyed that journey.
Yeah, and you, Romesh, I will place honouring to your own particular methodology of speaking. You have a very calming tonality, and you don't speak particularly quickly. And you also have subtleness of your expression. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's soft. But for me, you've got a really nice, reassuring rhythm to your whole vocal presence. And therefore, I'd say carry on. By the way, Mike, I'm not suggesting you haven't, but you have, between the two of you, you have a contrasting style of delivery. Mike's is a bit more, don't say this wrongly, Romesh, but it's a bit more enthusiastic, it's a bit more pacey. But between the two of you, it creates a nice cadence from one to the other.
Oh, thanks. That's really nice, interesting feedback. I mean, for me, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I think Mike and I totally acknowledge we've got slightly different styles, but hopefully they're complementary and we kind of lean into the fact that we're a little bit different. Mike, would you agree with that?
Yeah, a few people have already fed that back to us, Chris. How do you think, we're looking for advice now, how do you think we could use that insight from you to improve?
I'm not too sure, really, because what I've heard so far goes well in terms of the tic-tac between the two of you. Okay. And I can see sometimes, or I've heard, where you can see one person struggling and they're almost at the cul-de-sac of their conversation, and Romesh will come in like the superhero and rescue Mike from the end.
Don't give him that title.
I'm going to say
Mike will see Romesh thinking, I'm a bit stuck on this one, and Mike, you'll put your parachute on and help Romesh out of that particular pickle. So I think in terms of that aspect of handing the baton over from one to the other, the chemistry is there. Some of your questions, I think we started in the warm-up, is that the questions could enable your guests to be more elaborate with their expression by asking more emotional based questions. We have different parts of the brain that will filter the type of question that we have. And then you have a prefrontal cortex, which is a lot about facts and figures, Romesh's world. And then when we dive into the limbic, more reptilian, older part of our brain, this is where stories and emotion comes out. And from the episodes I've listened to, I feel sometimes that there are opportunities for the guest to be more vulnerable, more honest, or more open. And it's the ability for you to really actively listen and look out for those subtle cues that they're saying, just ask me a little bit more. And that's your honoring of the guest as the host to play out with as much of that person's personality as they're willing to give you by asking them a good question.
Such a great insight. Yes, I agree with that as well. And I sometimes, when I'm reflecting on them and I'm listening to them retrospectively, I can see there's questions I want to ask. You can see the audience member at that time is giving you a little thing to hang off, bad experience or something like that. But when you're in the moment and quite analytical, you sort of can move on and miss it. And I guess part of that is listening really carefully, but I guess part of it is knowing at the right point to ask that right question. And what would you say the leading parts of those questions should be? Could you give me an example of how you do that?
Well, generally the open questions are, if you could, I don't know whether anybody likes rugby or tennis, but I have a picture of 5 W's along the top of the tennis net, which are the what, when, where, why, who questions. And then the H of the tennis court is the how. And I love that metaphor because if you have a good game of tennis, which is friendly, you'll be batting the ball across the net to each other in a way that you want to keep the rally alive. And that's how good open questions happen. When you ask a closed question, which is something like, do you, have you, it's a closed question. And I say then the ace takes you out of the point and the game stops. So if you can think about the open questions of that archetype of the how is the tennis court grid, and then the W's are on the top of the tennis net, it helps you have the back and forth aspect of communication. Once you've got that, you might think, I want to learn more here. And the FBI interrogators will talk about the TED process, which is tell me, explain, and describe. And you go up and down that ladder to try to dive into the more emotional limbic parts of our brain where story narratives begin to come out. And simply by asking you, tell me, explain, describe, you unfurl all kinds of other parts of the discussion because it comes from a different part of the brain. This part is often like the CEO of the brain. It's stopping the information from going deeper because it wants to protect you or it wants to stop the brain from working. But actually, we want to get into the depths of our emotional part of our brain because when we do that, it helps you become more interesting, more insightful, and connect on a better level.
I love the analogy of the tennis court and the rallies, that continuing conversation. That's a really good way to to use imagery to reinforce that point. And actually, your point just now on emotion reminds me of something that you talked about in the presentation that I saw last year, Chris. And you talked about how best you can speak to, as a business owner, as a salesperson, how you can best speak to prospective customers. Do you mind talking us through that?
Yeah. Most of the conversations I hear in a networking pitch or a meeting start with the words I and we, and then it'll be, well, you know, we're this particular company, we've been operating for so many years, we've got ISO 9001, we've got BS 4765, we've got this certification, we've got 400 people, and we're amazing at what we do, and you know what, there's nobody else like us. Our unique selling point is our people and our service and our customer orientation. And actually for me, it's just noise, because that's all about me as the individual. And actually, from a interest perspective, I want to talk to you as the listener about something that is on your mind, on your desk, on your operational planning board. And when I talk to you about what you're thinking about, what you're trying to fix, solve, or head for as your North Star, then I am in your world. And I would urge people to talk about, from an SME founder perspective, it's not about what you do, it's how you meet the pain or the priority of the person that you want to serve.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So what do you think are the challenges at the moment when you're trying to sell? There's so much that's changing in the world, isn't there? You know, we're having a virtual conversation right now, for example, and that's very much become the norm. 5 years ago, that was something very different. You know, it was more of a kind of the exception rather than the norm. And do you find that, you know, the virtual versus in person, the changes in technology, do you think that is impacting the way that we speak to each other and the way we communicate?
A couple of questions there. So the challenge is good. First of all, Romesh, would be that we are in a war of attention. And as a business person, I could be on my LinkedIn, I could be on my YouTube, I could be on my podcasting studio, and I've got opportunity to be distracted all day long. So that's the challenge I think you would find as a founder or as a business owner, is how do you get the attention of the person that you want to talk to? And then the future challenge, or even the current challenge, is the replication of authentic communication through AI. I'm a great fan of AI. I have it always part of my day in terms of helping me ideate or amplify my thought process. But as an individual, I will never, ever allow it to replicate me as an individual. Or I have lots of people saying, let me do your LinkedIn for you. Let me do your socials for you. And I said to them, well, would you represent me at a networking meeting face to face where I want to meet people? Well, no, I wouldn't do that. Well, why would you want to do that for my LinkedIn? Because that's me. That's my personal brand. That's who I represent. But we are almost tempted to outsource so much of what is given to us because it's the cheap fix, it's the easy fix to allow us to be focused on what's important to us. But personally, for me, the challenge is be you and be as good as you can be with your vocal and your video presence, but never let yourself be replicated by something that is not authentically you.
Okay, so there's a key message of authenticity there, and that's interesting. We've heard that a number of times on prior episodes from different guests. One notably being Alex Priest, who's PR and kind of brand building as a specialism, and that's something like, for me personally, having authenticity is actually what makes me feel more comfortable, more confident. It was when I first started networking or speaking or whatever it was, putting myself in the spotlight, it was feeling inauthentic that actually made me feel less confident. So yeah, there's an interesting point there. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, Chris, was in the warming up. So you talked about moving around, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you gave some interesting examples. So Can you give us more flavour on how all of us as individuals can generally speak better?
Well, here's a clue. If you are doing a sales call or a presentation, I would urge you to stand up, which is what I'm doing now. And there's a study by Amy Keddy, who is a Harvard professor, and she talks about the aspect of when you are standing up, you are more empowered to give better presence. If you think about you chasing a saber-toothed tiger, trying to catch it, you'll never do that very well sat down. You would be stood up and you would be arming your organs and your ecosystem to be able to be the best human you can. And simply by standing up, you're making yourself more alert. Your blood pressure is probably a little bit higher. And there's even evidence by Amy Cuddy to say that things like testosterone levels and your ability to perform are heightened simply by standing. So that's one simple tactic I would ask you to do. If you are sat, the way that you construct your online presence, if you are online, also has importance. You'll see hopefully my eye line and my camera are in the same place. And I'm trying to think about looking at the camera and not at Romesh, which is down there, because my eyes are on the audience, hopefully looking at me, and I'm connecting with that particular person. And there's also an aspect of the social tile that I'm in. This is a stage that I'm on now. I think about my backdrop, I'm thinking about my lighting, I'm thinking about my acoustics, and this is as much a stage as it would be in the NEC for a physical meeting room. So that's about what I call state. And then once we get into the art of speaking, it's warming yourself up. So you might do a tongue twister. You could do the one about the slitted sheet or the pheasant plucker. Be careful with that one, or others. The coffee pot. There's many ways that you can have, and you're just warming up the mind and the lips to be in sync with each other, so that when you speak, you're already warming up this. And then there's the vocal. You might want a siren. Woo! You might want to brrr. And sometimes you just might want to go deep and come from the diaphragm, or you might want to go high. And you're using, I've just completely made a mocker of myself there. There you go. But that's what you would do as a sprinter, as a swimmer, as a boxer. You've got the pre-warm-up aspect, and then it's the visualization. What does this meeting look like? And as Mike's already shown you, he's listening back to the podcasts. And some people say, oh, I could never watch myself or listen to myself. It's such a horrible thing. Well, why not? Because discovery by listening back is the art of renewal. And you'll hear things, you'll see things. And I say to somebody, listen back with just the acoustics, and you're listening for you talking, and then turn the acoustics off and watch yourself back, whether that be an in-person meeting or online. See what you look like. You might always scratch your chin. You might be fiddling with something in your pocket or worse, and you'll see things that you miss, and then put them both together to see what the whole picture looks like, and then send it to a friend. So you send your podcast to Mike Romesh, and you say, Mike, be brutal with me. What was it like watching me back on the last podcast interview? What are a couple of things that I could do? What went well? What could be better? And then from that, take that forward. And with AI now, you can also take the transcript and you can feed it into AI and say, act as me, a communication skills specialist, look at the last transcript and find ways that I could have been more emotional. How could I have constructed my questions to be more insightful, etc., etc.
There are a couple of things.
I love that. I'm taking that as an action off the back of this, Chris. That I'm going to directly do that, and then I'll send you whatever it tells us off for. Amazing.
I know we spoke earlier about being bullied, and I always say speaking is the journey, and everybody feels as though they're not good enough, or they can't do it, or they're going to be judged. Nobody knows what you're going to say. Only you know the sentence that you missed or the framework that you didn't talk about. But most people, when people are speaking, they actually want you to succeed. And yet most people see the person that's looking down at their phone or they're scratching their chin, and they take that as a clue that the person is disinterested. I always say seek first to understand before you can be understood. And it could be in the audience, and Sally in the corner there is looking at her phone because her little boy hasn't been picked up by the childminder, and she's working with her phone to see if they can get the child care sorted out without her leaving the auditorium. And yet so many times we focus on the person that isn't paying attention as opposed to the 98 people that are.
I love the passion that you bring to this, Chris, and yes, you were talking to me in a really interesting way before the call about what I could do and how I could improve, and I think that's part of why this is so interesting, listening to you and the advice you're giving to people. The one thing that listening to you made me curious, and a lot of what we talk about on Strive and Thrive is about entrepreneurs, and we're giving advice through what you do to entrepreneurs. But can you describe a little bit, Chris, the entrepreneur? What's your personal experience of being an entrepreneur?
Wow. This is where you could reach into the messy parts of my world in terms of
that's my intention.
Are you sure you want to go there?
Yeah, I do. I'm curious. You're an entrepreneur as much as the rest of us, and I think it'd be really interesting to know your entrepreneurial experience.
Absolutely.
Am I an entrepreneur? Well, first of all, I've created a job for myself, and the business that I do relies on me to be in it. So to be an entrepreneur, I think, is one where if I was to leave on Friday and come back a month later, my business would still be operating and I would have cash flow and revenue and things would be succeeding. Okay. Technically speaking, without me in its current guise, I would have no business. And therefore, I am a worker doing a job in the business that I operate. I would not say that I am an entrepreneur. That's not to say that in the future I'm not working on some assets that will give me revenue while I sleep, but currently I wouldn't define myself as being an entrepreneur. I do have an entrepreneurial mindset. I take you back to 2017 when I was working on a conference and events company, successful, nearly at 7 figures, operating with a big team. And I had what I would call a big egg as one customer in a very small nest. And one of the observations I give to any founder is, please do not allow yourself to be wedded to one particular customer, because while the hay is there, the sun shines, it's great. But once that egg splits, you are left in all kinds of problems, particularly if you've got fixed costs and operating levels into that business that you can't walk away from quickly. So as a result of a conversation of surprise, I had to close that business down as a voluntary liquidation. And I had to walk into my team on the 30th of January, 2018 and say to everybody, you paid, everything's honored. However, today's the last day that we'll be working together. And for me, the two feelings that came out of that was shame and guilt. And I had to sit with those emotions for a long period of time, which is...
That must have been so hard.
Well, it was really difficult, Romesh. Having said that, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine in France who's also been through some really difficult things. And I say, if you can find a person that has been into the pit of adversity and has found the will and the gumption and the desire to climb out of that, you'll find the strongest and the most willing to impart that knowledge to other people, because they've been in places where most people would never, ever want to find themselves. And I've been in that pit. And what I learned from that suggests that I would do it again. I don't wish to do it again. But the lessons and learnings and what I would want to have as by way of a big team or a small team says to me, I'm quite happy being an entrepreneur, working in my own space in my own way, having my own routines and my own principles that I'll be guided by. Because I don't know whether or not I was cut out to having a big team and some of the habits that I needed to be a large founder with many, many different plates to spin and balls to catch.
Really interesting. And can you explain to me how you took that learning journey and how you've turned it into your own consultancy now, and the experience you've gone through that's turned you in and telling your own story, I guess, that you are now?
Well, the journey that I went on was one after that was very, very harsh and very low. And thankfully, I didn't do what my mind was compelling me to want to do. I reached into fitness and endurance, and it was a case of layering on one after the other. I went from doing a sprint triathlon to doing a longer, to a half Ironman, to doing a full Ironman. I don't say that to try to blow smoke up my own backside. It's just that was my therapy of doing little tiny iterations day by day to make me feel as though I was rising and getting better. And then I used that power of constant repetition, of discipline, consistency, and perseverance to say, well, if I could do that, what else is possible for me? And I am a practice of habit. I have ways and means of keeping myself on the main thing is the main thing. And you'll see me on a Monday morning sitting down with my journal, my diary, talking about the week. What are the things that are important this week? What's the must-do manifesto? What are the things that I want to achieve by Friday? And you'll see me chasing metrics, whether it be on YouTube likes or social media engagement, things that say to me, I can see that the journey is incremental gains. No matter how small every day, I can see that progress comes. And my adage is nothing good comes easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Sometimes you've got to be prepared to sacrifice. And it's what I'll do at 6 o'clock on a Friday night or 4 o'clock on a Sunday that enables me to continue growing.
Amazing. And how have you found that has helped you help other founders, like you're talking at the early part of the call? Your own journey is super interesting, and have you used that to stimulate how you help people like myself, Romesh, other founders?
The question really to them, Mike, it starts with, well, what's the why? Why is it you're doing what you're doing? And why does it matter to you and other people? And when you really get into the detail of what's the purpose? Why do you want to do what you do? You evoke more emotions from somebody as to why you're willing to do what you need to do at 2 o'clock in the morning, or why you're wanting to sacrifice not going out with your mates tomorrow night. So it's about understanding from them, what is it you are trying to do? Why did you want to take that jump off the career comfort of being in a big firm or a big consultancy? Were you pushed, or did you jump? Or did you decide to walk out because that world was no longer serving you? So it's really understanding from them, why are you on the journey you're on? And what does the 1 year goal look like? What does the 5 year goal look like? And everybody says, where do you want to be in 5 years? But I don't know about you, I'm 56. But when you say to somebody, when you're 61, what does that look like for you? And it's suddenly people go, wow, I don't know how old you are, Mike, today. What are you, about 27?
28.
Yeah,
Nearly.
28. Yeah.
Coming up to my 50th in a couple of years.
So when you're 50th, and I said to you, all right, well, what does 55 look like for you? Does it make a different thought in your head in terms of 55? Well, that's actually quite old. And then you start to think about, well, how fit do I want to be? How many days do I want to be working? How much money do I want to have? What kind of relationship do I have? What kind of things will I be doing to show growing legacy? And the questions from, why is this important to you? Explain to me why that matters. Describe what success looks like. Tell me why this and not that. We're plundering the mind there of beliefs, values, importance as to why you want to be on the planet you're on.
And do you obviously spend a lot of time talking to founders and thinking about who they are, what their problems are, what they're doing. Do you spend much time thinking about the future and how they tell stories about what the future might look like and how they build a future narrative? Because that's much more, it's less common.
Sometimes, often you'll get asked 3 questions of life. Hey, Mike, what is it you do? And then you give them the answer that you've obviously rehearsed, practiced, and iterated on. And then the second question, they'll say, well, why? Why do you want to do that? And then again, you'll have a story narrative about why it's important to you. And then often they'll say to you, that's interesting, Mike. So what's next? Where are you taking your particular business consultancy fractional job? So yes, you will get that question. And sometimes people might say, well, do you know what? I'm just quite happy living for today. Because tomorrow, I don't really know what tomorrow is. But of course, I have a bit of a roadmap as to what we're trying to do. But if you think back in the last 12 months, the last 2 years, Claude, ChatGPT, and every other aspect of AI didn't exist then. What the next 2 years is going to look like, who knows? But I do say to clients, have what I call a Periscope session. At least every 90 days, put your Periscope up as if you're a metaphorical submarine and pause. Look backwards to see where you've come from. Look around you to see what other people and what the environment, economy, and the world is doing. And then look forward and then plan what's the first step that I need to do in order to get to that next point, having taken on board all aspects of where you've come from, where you are, and where you want to get to.
I love that metaphor. I'm going to steal. There's a few things I'm stealing from your narratives, Chris, and the Periscope is another good one.
It is another good one, and interestingly, Mike and I did an episode a couple of weeks ago where we reflected on our learnings from 2025, and one of them was taking some time out to think about things, to have that helicopter view, that macro view of what's happening in the past, what's happening in the future, and what's happening now. And the Periscope analogy is excellent. You're very good at that. You're good at asking quite thought-provoking questions, Chris. I think that's a real superpower. That's what I'm picking up very much.
I'm also very compelled to ask people to take action. So today, when this podcast is being aired, it's the 15th of January. And you've still got 350 days of the year. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you've already lost 15 days of 2026 already. But you've got an opportunity now to put some markers in the sand now. So let's say it's the 1st of April, it's the 1st of July, it's the 1st of October, and put that in your diary now of a Periscope session with yourself, your founder, your business partner, your relationships, and get it in the diary. I say to a client, show me your calendar and I'll show you your life. But you can't put it in retrospectively, because on the 1st of April 2026, on the day you'll be busy because your calendar is already filled up with stuff. But if you put it in now, it's in. And the only person that can compromise that appointment is you overriding it. So take a minute to put 3 meetings in with your diary, to have a Periscope reflective session. And if you want to go on something like the Life Wheel, you can do that online, analyze yourself on 8 metrics of financials, growth, relationship, health, work-life balance, spirituality, growth, and it'll ask you where you plot yourself now, and it'll show you where you've got a kink in your wheel, which is a clue. If you've got a kink in the wheel, it doesn't go round very fast. You need to fix that kink before you can go faster.
Can I ask what's on your Periscope thought process at the moment for Chris, particularly for helping people who are looking at speaking and talking? What do you see out there in reflection and in the future?
2026 for me will be about community and allowing people to have a place that is authentic and real. I personally feel that the way that AI is going, that you can't actually see anything and think, is this real or is it fiction? And I think that people are going to resist in some aspects, some channels that are not serving them with what I would consider to be authentic. So I'm creating my own little community. Again, I know I'm not selling, but I have my own little community where we will talk exclusively about the art of speaking and selling. So that's one key imperative for me. Secondly is about a book. So I've already charted some of my trials and tribulations of life. So I have a book out in 2026, which is called Pride and Prime, Why Your Ego Screws You Over. Because I do think a lot of us are served by ego. Yeah, it's a book of two parts. The first part is very much a discovery of why do we ruin ourselves? Why do we think about ourselves so badly? Why do we judge ourselves? Why do we talk to ourselves in such a demeaning way that we wouldn't talk to a friend the way we talk to ourselves sometimes? So the first part is about realization of why we're so messed up as a human species. The second part is all about enablement, empowerment, and self-discovery of simple things that you can do day by day, minute by minute, or week by week to try to enable yourself to not be so distracted by pride, ego, and self-impostorment and punishment of your own thoughts.
What made you write that book, Chris? Self-learning or insights from doing your work?
All of those, Mike. Yeah. I think everybody says they've got a book in them. So it's, again, another one of those things to say, well, how long is it going to take? What's the art of writing every day for 500 days, for 500 words, and just doing the do? Sometimes it was crap words, sometimes they were good words, but at the end of the day, by not picking up the typewriter and writing, you're never going to get 500 or 5,000 words done. So it was the principle of being consistent and not being distracted by finishing the book. The other part was simply me reflecting back to myself as to who I am and what is this construct of my own internal narrative that could be harming or hurting me or loving me. It sounds a really thing to say loving yourself, but if you can't love yourself, then who are you going to love? And writing the book really enabled me to think carefully about how I talk to myself, why I talk to myself sometimes in a disempowering way, and how I could become more lucid about that. So I create a whole character. He's called Clyde. He is my worst bloody nightmare. Sometimes he's my best friend, but I have a whole personality for him.
I look forward to meeting Clyde.
You don't want to meet Clyde. He is, I'm not going to there. He is a pain in the arse sometimes. Yeah.
And is there a big...
He'll appear now on a podcast, he'll appear and he'll say, oh, you didn't answer that question very well, did you? Or he'll sort of say, oh, and he'll natter at me in my ear. But I'll say to him, Clyde, I'm in the driving seat right now. I'm running the show. You sit back there and just be quiet because I don't need you right now. But he's there. He's there to help me, really. His intentions are good. But he doesn't have any aspect of understanding the right moment at the right time. He just pops up and just goes, eh.
I love this. This is telling us much more stories about Chris. Is there a bigger story you're trying to tell as well, Chris? Is there something you see out there in the world nowadays? You've talked about AI and authenticity, but is there something around education and how people are taught about speaking, confidence, storytelling? Anything in that in terms of the world that you see?
Well, I've not been a student for a long time, but from what I hear for people that I know are still in the leadership space in education, you have a curriculum that's about the achievement of a standard, a grade, and we're all inclined to take everybody along the same journey, and you're successful if you got 3 A's, and then you can go on to the next part of your chapter of life, which is great if you can appeal to the majority. But there'll be outliers who don't fit in that particular mold that are left behind. And equally, when you go to your first job, your first interaction, your first date, whatever it is, you've got to have the ability to communicate, ask questions, be interesting, and not be sidelined in a meeting because your voice you thought was not worth hearing, or the extrovert speak first, or the introvert that doesn't feel as though they can put the hand up for the fear of admonishment or ridicule. And school, again, I'm not here to diss any aspect of any teacher, leader, person in education, but I haven't seen public speaking or the ability to connect with an audience and understanding where the emotional parts of our brain comes from that enables us to be happy with ourselves, be comfortable with ourselves, to embrace things like meditation or journaling or mindfulness, to walk out in nature and enjoy the power of looking in awe of a big oak tree or a canyon or a river, and just dwell on being in the moment of being part of the beautiful planet that you're in. For me, there's a lot about education that is great, but whether or not it teaches the life skill of how to be human and how to be vulnerable and how to be comfortable being uncomfortable, I'm not sure that that's replicated in all aspects of education.
And I think you're saying that not everyone follows the same path exactly as well, right? That we've all got individual nuances, and that's fine.
Yeah, and Mike, you're your own person running your own business. Romesh, you're the same. At some point, you decided that you were going to turn your back on whatever society told you you should or could be doing, and you thought, I'm not too sure this is what I wanted. You took the brave leap of faith to walk away from that comfort of a paycheck and all the trappings of what a business can provide for you when you are employed. So many people sit on their hands and then they wake up at age 55, 65, 71 and just go, do you know what? I wonder what would have happened if. Well, it's too late then. It's gone. And what is the phrase? The voice of regret is one of the worst ones. It weighs tons because you can never detach yourself from regret. So when you answered your question a minute ago, Mike, what's the big picture? For me, it's about importance, legacy. Richness for me is about giving somebody something that will empower them to be better than when I first met them. And that for me is better than a Rolls Royce, a Ferrari, a Lamborghini. Those things would be nice. But when you have your last breath, your last wish, your last moment, all that stuff fails into significance. But if you sit down at that last moment and think, I don't know whether or not I lived a life that is full as and as good and as rich as it could be, well, you can't silence that noise then.
Beautiful.
That's really excellent, Chris. Gosh, it's sadly it's time to wrap up.
But isn't it? Goodness me.
It is. I know it's flown by.
I've spoken too much. There you go. That's Clyde. Yeah. Clyde's now saying, you've spoken too much. It's been all about you, Chris. Yeah, there you go. He's just taking front seat and I've just slapped him. Shut up, Clyde. Not your turn.
No, I think you controlled Clyde well, or Clyde guided you in the right way, however you want to see that. There were so many really fascinating stories and examples, lots to unpack, really, and thoroughly enjoyable. I mean, my takeaways, I suppose, you were talking not just about public speaking, you were talking about being in meetings, in just interactions with people, so I want to kind of stress that point. But even then, whatever the scenario is, prepare well, prime yourself for success. That's a real key takeaway from me. I love your focus on energy levels. When you did all those warm-up little exercises, interestingly, you gave yourself higher energy, but you gave us higher energy as well, which was really interesting to see. So be infectious, I think, is a really good takeaway I've gotten from this. If it wasn't said specifically, it was something I felt. And I really enjoyed your point, or not necessarily enjoyed, but really appreciated your point on sacrifice. Because that's something that, we talk about resilience, we talk about the ups and downs of being a business owner, an entrepreneur, a founder, a business leader, but the sacrifice, there is an opportunity cost, isn't there, for what you're doing, and you're choosing to make that. And really good, but all wonderfully told with some excellent anecdotes. Thank you, Mike. What are your thoughts?
I've got loads of scribbled notes, and I've got two takeaways. So I'll give you the takeaways for me, Chris, and then I'll give you my insight. Here's two takeaways. One is I really like the idea of your Periscope session, and I think that is one that I will do on a specific purpose at the moment, and I can see a benefit to it in a slightly different way to a lessons learned, for example. It's making you think slightly differently. The other one is I'll get a transcript of this session and have a look how I can ask better questions, because I think that is super good. And the other one, this is a reflection, I think. So they're the two actions. Authenticity. At the beginning of the call, you were really expressive and dynamic and energizing in the way you explained yourselves. But I kept having, where does authenticity play into this? You know, there's a storytelling, and then there's the real story and the real you. And it became towards the end, I saw the real you. And I was like, and you said, look, online people, you don't know who's who anymore sometimes. Don't use a marketing person to do your LinkedIn if you wouldn't use them to do your networking event, for example. And I think there's something about real authenticity and real storytelling that is a little bit lost at the moment. And I do think some leaders who aren't natural at this may think that's a natural solution. Get someone to do your marketing. And I think for me, there's that holding that authenticity to your own true story is really probably my sort of most interesting takeaway from this session.
I think it's really important to have consistency in your values and to take that forward. You know, whether you use someone to help you with marketing, that's fine, isn't it? Whether that's a person or it's AI, but ensure that it's authentic to your values as well. I think that's really important. But yeah, Chris, thank you again. It's been really thought-provoking. So thank you everyone for listening or watching today, and we hope you enjoyed the chat as much as we obviously did. Strive and Thrive is a podcast for entrepreneurs, founders and business leaders. Please do like, follow and subscribe to Strive and Thrive wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.